we should get started. Okay. All right, so thank you everyone for coming today to the workshop, either virtually or in person. What this workshop is today is the 2025 Active Transportation Program, or Cycle 7, the Funding Reduction Workshop. And, as we go along, we'll explain what that means. Okay, so my name is Lori Waters. I'm the program manager for the Active Transportation Program at the California Transportation Commission. And then helping to run the meeting today, we have Beverly Newman-Burkhart and Rebecca Light, and then other people in the room, and I'm going to introduce some of them in a little bit. But okay, so Rebecca, did you want to do the how they can participate in the meeting, or do you want me to just? Okay, so I will just wing it. So today you can participate in various ways. If you want to ask a question, then please put it in the Q&A section on the computer, or you can ask to be unmuted, and then you can ask your questions or make your comment that way. And this workshop is being recorded, correct? Okay. Anything else that I forgot?
People can also raise their hands, or in the Q&A. Yeah.
People can raise their hands. However, I mean, everybody's done this a million times now, so you know how to participate. And please do. This should be a conversation, not just a presentation today. Okay, so
Lori, briefly,
yes.
we do have one hand raised by Alberto. So Alberto, okay. I'm going to allow you to talk. And Alberto, you can unmute yourself at this time if you have something to say. Okay. They're not.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. I raised my hand by mistake. I'm sorry.
Oh, all right. All right. No worries. I'll mute you now. Thank you.
Thank you.
So is Alberto talking?
No, he's good. It was an accident.
Okay. Okay. All right. So you might be wondering, why the heck are we having an ATP workshop right in the middle of the cycle when we're actually evaluating applications right now? Usually when that happens, it's either something really good has happened or something really bad. So fortunately, in this case, it's the latter. And so what we are going to talk about today is that now the final budget has been published. It's the state budget. It is affecting this cycle, the ATP. And we'll talk about that more as we go along. So, and to help us today, because we're going to be talking possibly about the budget and legislation, we have some people that are going to help us today that I want to thank them for being here. So we have Keith Duncan with Caltrans budgets, and him and his staff of Garrett and Matt, and I'm sure others help with the ATP fund estimate. So he's here if we have any budget questions. I want to thank my boss, Teresa Favila, for being here. She can help us if we get into any kind of more complicated programming questions. And then Justin Behrens, who is the commission's legislative deputy director. He is here too, that will help us with if we have any questions regarding legislation. And then also in the room, we have a lot of Caltrans staff, ATP program managers, Desiree Fox, Elijah Hall, and then Allie Westbrook, Cirillo, Lilikin, Emma, Melanie, and then Michael Hutchinson and Hutchins, and Kathy. And I forgot his last name. Okay, so thank you all for being here. Okay, and we're going to talk about a few things I also want to thank our ATP Technical Advisory Committee. And I'm sure many of you are on this workshop. And so we already had a TAC meeting to talk through the things that we're going to talk through with all of the larger stakeholder group today. And the reason that we do that is that we're not trying to work out everything before we come to talk to all of you. It's just the TAC helps us kind of narrow down issues and work through some things. Because if we had to just totally brainstorm with 200 people on an online meeting, we wouldn't get anywhere. So the TAC helps us, and I really appreciate them. But just to make sure everyone understands that what we've already, what we're going to talk about today, nothing's finalized yet. Nothing is final until the commission adopts it. So we're still here to take input and to answer questions. Okay, so I also want to talk about what this workshop is not. And this workshop is not about making changes to the guidelines other than the few that we're going to talk about today. We can't do that now. The guidelines have been adopted. We're in the middle of reviewing applications. If you have some great ideas for the program, save those until we do the next guidelines update. And also, as we talk about things, one thing I want everybody to remember is that we are going to make some amendments to the guidelines, but we're being very careful that we're not going to add anything or amend anything that would change what was already submitted in the applications. That's really important. The applications came in the middle of June, so we can't suddenly implement some new policy that would have changed what people submitted. And let me give you an example of that. So as you probably have guessed, what we're going to talk about is a reduction in funding. So we wouldn't want to propose something now that says, oh, we're going to have reduced funding. We're going to prioritize small projects that serve older adults. That might be a great idea to do sometime. We can't do that now because that would have changed possibly what someone could have submitted to this cycle. So an applicant could say, well, if I would have known that, I wouldn't have submitted my large $20 million project that is for safe routes to schools. So I hope everybody understands that distinction. We can't make any changes now that would affect what people would have submitted. Okay, and also with that, this really isn't the right time to, make a comment that you really support the ATP and please restore the funding to it. Because we can't do that. That's not in our power. That can only be done through additional budget appropriations. So there might be other places and times that you could do that, but this really is not what we're here to do today. Okay. Okay, so I have to say that what we have to share today is pretty grim. I'll just say that. But what we want to make sure is that everybody understands what's happening and the ways that we are proposing to address it. So because of that, I'm going to pause a lot to make time for questions. And, if I'm just pausing, I haven't passed out or anything. It's just, I really want to make sure that everybody can get their comments and questions in. So, and if we have to go over, then we have to go over. That's just how it is. Okay. So, and next slide. Okay. So just in case we need it, since this is a little grim, I did include our slide of our cute commission, ATP, and LTCAP staff dogs. So they're so cute. So if everybody's starting to feel bad or feel sad, we'll just pull up a picture of our cute dogs and hopefully that'll help. Okay. I think that's all I had for introductory, and I'm going to stop now just for any questions. See, and Anybody in the room too, if you wanted to add anything I forgot to start off with?
We did. Kim Line Hoxie, will we be able to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
I think what we do is we usually post it, right, Beverly?
Right.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so the PowerPoint and the recording will be posted on the commission's website. Getting anything else? Okay. Okay, next slide then. Okay, so these are our goals for today. What we'll do is, just so everyone knows what we're working with this cycle, we'll give a little summary of the applications, the 2025 or cycle 7 applications that we've received so far. Those came in mid-June. So we can tell you what we've received. And then we'll talk about what came out in the state budget, also in late June, that affects the active transportation program. And then we will discuss the challenges that we have identified as staff and through the technical advisory committee, that how the state budget will impact this cycle of the ATP. And then at the end, we can see if any of the stakeholders have anything else that you have identified. Oh my gosh, you guys didn't even think about this. This is also going to be a problem. Please let us know. And so that's our goal for today. Any questions? Okay, so at the commission meeting, there'll be a presentation with a summary of what we've received for this cycle of the ATP. So this is just some brief stats. We're still working on going through other stats, but this is kind of generally what we've received. We've received 275 applications. Overall, all of those total project costs together is 4.1 billion. The total ATP requests, 2.5 billion. Average project cost is 14.8 million. Average ATP request, 9.2 million. Largest total project cost, 128.7 million. Largest ATP request, 60.4 million, and smallest is 250,000. So if this doesn't mean anything to you, I'll interpret it a little bit. So we did get less applications than we received last cycle. So last cycle, we received 454, Beverly, is that right? 454 applications. So considerably more applications. However, the total ATP request last cycle was, I think, 3.1 billion, if I remember correctly. So, and this cycle, it's 2.5 billion. So even though we received quite a bit less applications, the total ATP request is not that much less. So what that tells us is that we're continuing the trend of we're getting applications that are requesting more funding, and we're just seeing larger projects. Okay. Any questions? Anything else anyone wants to know on just the general summary of cycle 7 so far? I'm going to pause here. Okay. Okay, we'll go to the next slide then. Okay, so this is taken from the California State Budget Summary, the 24-25 budget summary. Yes.
There's a hand raised.
Okay.
Ben Matla, I will allow you to talk, and you can unmute yourself whenever you're ready.
Sorry, selfishly just curious how many quick build projects applied for this cycle?
Was it Ben? That's who we're waiting for, Ben Matlow?
Can you not hear? Oh, because you don't hear him. So sorry, this is not something I do every day. Ben asked selfishly, how many quick build applications did the commission receive?
Was it 9?
8.
8.
A total of 8 applications asking for 6.7 million, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
That was it.
Okay. Okay, so this is what the budget said about the active transportation program. The budget maintains 200 million of the original investment total in fiscal years 24-25 and 25-26, and allows for the remaining 400 million to be added subject to appropriation in future fiscal years. You know, I'm going to go back for just a second. So for those of you that don't know, last cycle we received a very large augmentation to the program of 1.49 billion in funds. And that was from the general fund because last year or 2 years ago or whenever that happened, it was the budget situation was different. And so we were augmented by quite a lot of funds. Okay, so, and what we did is last cycle, cycle 6, we programmed all of that additional augmentation funding. So we had a very large cycle last cycle. So, but then what happened in this budget is that through the budget process, some of that general fund money was taken back, I would say, at least for now. At one point it was 600 million. It's been different numbers in this whole budget process, but this is where the final budget landed with, they stayed with that 600 million, but they appropriated 200 million now for the ATP. And that leaves 400 million that has not been appropriated yet. It could be, as it says, it could be appropriated in future years, or it may not be. We don't know. It could be, you know, next year. It could be a week from now. We don't know, or it could be never. So this is where we're at with the budget. Basically, 400 million of our funding has been reduced. Any questions before I go on? Teresa, are you thinking something that you wanted to say? Okay.
We have a hand raised online, Lori, from Melanie Curry. Melanie, I'm going to allow you to talk and go ahead and unmute yourself whenever you're ready.
Hi, thanks. I'm just really confused by this.
Hey, Melanie, give us a second. We're getting some Lori, I think she can hear him.
Okay.
Can you hear anything?
No.
One second, Melanie.
Do you have your computer muted? Probably do.
Yes.
Okay, you could probably take that out.
Oh, you can probably take it out then.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Teresa, we need to stop drinking. I know. Okay. All right. So can I hear now?
Yes, I think you're here. Melanie, go ahead and say something. Let's see if Lori can hear you.
Okay, I'm talking now.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Sorry, I have probably asked this question a million times, but I'm really confused by you guys said that you allocated all of that augmentation and then now they're taking it back. So is the 400 million, the 600 million, is that all from the augmentation that you already allocated? And how does that relate to cycle 7? I'm getting a little bit lost in that. And thanks for explaining.
Okay. Do I need to mute now? I need to mute, so, or I'm okay? Okay. Okay, so Keith is probably gonna have to help with that, to a certain extent. So we did program, not allocate, we programmed all of that augmentation in last cycle. So, but I don't know how to explain this. Keith might have to help. Okay, Keith Duncan from Caltrans Budgets is gonna help explain. Okay.
So in total, as Lori's mentioning, we received 1.05 billion general fund augmentation. All of those funds were programmed as part of the cycle 6 program of projects. With this reduction to that augmentation. It's a net reduction of about $400 million. Since those technically were programmed onto projects, what the exercise is now is the funds that were originally going to be for this cycle 7, which we're talking about now, 400 million of that is net. That's what we're pulling to make sure that cycle 6 projects are going to be fully funded. So at the end of the day, the cycle 7, the amount of money that's going to be available for this next cycle 7 is being reduced, so those funds can be redirected to cover cycle 6. So that's just the general notion of the plan in place. I can provide more details about the numbers, but I hope that helps, Melanie.
It kind of does, but it still doesn't. I don't know how much cycle 7 has available.
We're
Given all,
getting to that.
it sounds like 0, 0, 0.
No, but we're getting to that.
Okay.
So, and when we say program, that's kind of a somewhat of a technical term. So you can also say it was promised to projects. So, and when we're looking at the general fund reduction, our first priority was to keep those projects that were promised funds in cycle 6, keep the promise to those projects. So that means then the reduction hits this cycle. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so Melanie, I'll get back to your question about how much funding is available. I'm trying to follow a progression here so I don't lose anyone. Okay, so because of this, we're going to have to take some actions at the next commission meeting to deal with this issue. Okay, so we have a lot of different other ATP items on the commission meeting, but these are the ones I wanted to talk about right now. So we have a commission meeting in August. It's in San Diego. It's August 16th and 17th, and you can attend in person or you can attend virtually. So we will have an update on the 2025 Active Transportation Program. That's an information item. It's an expanded version of what I just told you of what we received in this cycle. Okay, and then we will do an adoption of the amended 2025 Active Transportation Program fund estimate. And this will be an item that Keith will present. And this is an action item. That means the commission will vote on it. And I'm going to come back to that in a second because I want to make sure people know what a fund estimate is. And then the other action is we will have an adoption of the amended 2025 Active Transportation Program guidelines. This is also an action item. It's what the commissioners will vote on. And these are the slight changes that we need to make to the guidelines to help us manage this reduction in funds. So Beverly, can you pull up a fund estimate?
Fund estimate the commissioner approved for
Yes.
the old.
I just want people to remember what it looks like. Cycle 6. Yeah, cycle 7. Cycle 6. Yeah.
Quickly, while we're waiting for Beverly, Rachel asked, is the 200 million sufficient to cover the cycle 6 projects awaiting allocation? Rachel asks, is the 200 million sufficient to cover the cycle 6 projects awaiting allocation?
So it's not 200 million. So we still are getting most of that augmentation. What they were reducing was actually started out 600 million. And then they appropriated 200 million already.
I guess
So-
the key takeaway though is by doing this exercise, we have enough funding to meet our commitments for
Yes.
cycle 6.
Yes, so we have enough funding to meet the commitments from cycle 6. So, and it's not just that 200 million. So don't worry about that. Okay, this is what a fund estimate looks like. And just so everybody knows, and this is what Keith and his team put together. It kind of details what what type of funding is available for the program. If it's state funding, federal funding, what years. It has a lot of numbers on it, but the one that I focus on is the programmable resources. That tells us what we have to program against, or what we can promise applicants in any given cycle. Just to remind everybody too, that the active transportation program by statute, any funding we have is split 3 ways. 50% of the funding is, it can be promised to any project located anywhere in the state. So we call that the statewide component. And then there's the small urban and rural component. And 10% of the funding goes to any projects that are located outside the boundaries of any of the 10 largest MPOs, metropolitan planning organizations. And what that is that's generally the Central Coast, Northern California, and a couple other places, one area in the valley. So that's small urban and rural. And then 40% of the funding, or what we call the programmable resources, will go to the metropolitan planning organization project, split amongst the 10 largest MPOs. And that split, even if we get more funding at any time, we have to follow that split. That's in statute. We always follow that split. Even if we got $10 million, we'd have to follow the split. Okay. Any questions?
Make sure you, this is the part that's going to get the commission approved.
I know, I'm getting to it.
We have one question online from
Yes.
Ophelia. The 200 million in 24-25 and 25-26 is total ATP funding, correct? Both state and regional apportionment?
I think I'm gonna have to, I couldn't understand you.
Oh,
Okay, what about now? Yeah. Okay,
Okay,
the 200 million in 24-25 and 25-26 is total funding, correct? Both state and federal apportionment.
The 600 million?
Okay, let's-
The question is 200.
okay, so let's go to the next slide.
Where is it coming from?
I'm not sure, but I'm gonna go to the next slide because I thought this would be helpful, but maybe it's not. So, okay. Okay, so what that means is, so I tried to make this slide so you could see what this actually really means for the program. Okay, so that first line there, that's what was adopted originally for cycle 7. We adopted that in March in the fund estimate. So at that time, we had programmable resources of 568,700,000. Okay, so right now we have a reduction of 400 million. So that leaves us for the whole program for this cycle, 168,700,000. And remember that split up by the 3 components, and I'll get to those numbers in a minute. And and you'll see different numbers in different years. That is how budgets has to manage the funds. I don't know how to say it other than that. But when we program, we try to kind of program as closely to those numbers as we can. We have to be careful about not over programming or putting too much commitments in those early years. So that's why you'll see that there's always more funding in the last year of the cycle, because that's where most people are asking for construction. Okay, so I know that this is kind of complicated, so I'm going to stop here. And if anybody has a way that they can help explain it, or any questions.
No questions online. or we do have one hand raised to Ophelia. Ophelia, you may unmute yourself.
Ophelia, you can unmute yourself if you have a question.
There we go. Hi, this is actually Robert Phipps. I'm using Ophelia's login. Robert Phipps, Fresno Council of Governments. And yeah, I think I know the answer to this. I think I understand it. I just want to verify. So on a year-by-year basis under the revised estimate, so 25, 26, 21 million, for example, 090, that is state, and that's going to be the state and regional apportionment. That's the total that's going to
Yes.
be available for the, right. Okay. That's what I thought. Just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. Thank you.
Yes. And so when the revised fund estimate comes to the commission in August, so I think Keith and his staff are still working on it, because not only does it doesn't have just these numbers, it actually has the split for each MPO, which is probably why, Robert, you're asking about this. So that will tell you how much each MPO has. We
Right.
could probably guesstimate it now, but Keith, that'll be in the revised one, correct? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. That's a good question.
We have many more questions.
Okay.
David Aguirre, I'm going to allow you to talk. You can unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone. My apologies. Actually, I just I inadvertently clicked the raised hand button.
Okay,
That's
no
okay.
problem. Sophia Ravakova, you may speak now.
Hello, thank you. Sophia Avico, the Coalition for Clean Air. Just wanted to make sure I understand these numbers correctly. So it says here that the ATP for the cycle originally had about 560 million, and now that the 400 million cut has went through, it has 160 million left. But originally, what was proposed in the budget was a 600 million cut. So does that mean if that original cut went through, this funding for the cycle would be zero?
Yes, it would have been zero.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Sophia. We have another question from Denise Sifford. This is in the Q&A. She asks, will there be a full breakdown of the programming resources?
That is, I just needed to confirm.
Oh, thank you, Sophia. So Denise asks,
Will there be a full breakdown of the programming resources by state versus federal ATP revenues as part of the August CTC amended act?
Yes, there will be.
Thank you.
And we will be talking a little bit more about state versus federal too, later in the workshop.
We have another question from Derek Winning. Should future budgets restore the 400 million, will cycle 7 awards be augmented to reflect? Thanks.
We're getting to that.
Ben Matlaw asks, is the $200 million amount just to round it up 168.7 million number?
No, they're two different things. The 200 million is what we received now out of the original $600 million cut. The reason why you can't line up the numbers exactly right now is most of the augmentation funds are for the last cycle. And so we had to move, and if I'm explaining this totally wrong, Keith will have to help me. We had to use resources that we originally had for this cycle back to cycle 6 to make sure that we can keep those projects whole, that we can keep those promised funds on those projects. That's why it's not lining up right. And yeah, I don't know if that's making sense or not. Okay.
another question from Alberto. would the budget reduction reduce the number of projects approved for cycle 7?
It will greatly reduce that. So I'll go to the next slide, and people can keep asking questions, but the next slide may explain more. Actually, okay, yeah. Maybe should have reversed 2 slides, but is there any other questions? I don't want to move on yet. If okay. So, and we'll get to more numbers, but so these are the things that we have identified that we need to talk about to deal with this much reduced cycle of funding. So for the statewide small urban and rural components, those are the ones that the commission does the project selection for. We will program to the revised fund estimate. What that means is we are going to program to what Keith presents at the August meeting. So we're not going to over program. We have 168.7 million. So we will program to that. We can't over program because we don't know if we're going to get any other funds. So we have to be really careful on what we do. So, and we'll talk about how we're going to do that. And so what we're proposing, because we might get more funds, we might get that 400 million. So we need to be, unfortunately, the way this whole budget thing is working out, it does not line up with how we do our program at all. So we're having to kind of adjust as we go along. So what do we do if we get that 400 million or 100 million or 200 million or whatever? So what we want to do is also when we adopt our program of projects that we know we have funding for, we want to also adopt a contingency list of projects with that 400 million. And when I say 400 million, that's the full amount. That's not the broken down. That would be 200 million to state and 40 million to small and rural. And I have another slide that shows all of those numbers. So that's what we are proposing to do. There's a couple reasons for that. One of the reasons is then we have that contingency list of projects that we can just pull in and program those as we get additional funds. But also then we will have a list of projects that could have been funded if the funding wouldn't have been reduced. So everybody can see, okay, there's these projects that would have been funded if the 400 million was not reduced. Okay, and then the other situation that we think we're going to have, and this is something that Beverly and I think was going to be a problem because it was kind of getting to be an issue even last cycle. So all of our projects are scored out of 100 points. And we recommend funding projects down to the amount of funding that we have based on the score. And what's been happening is because even with full funding, we have a lot more projects than we have funding for. So we end up with projects scoring the same, getting the same score at what we call the funding cutoff, meaning that we have $10 million left in funding. And so we're going down, figuring out what we can fund. And we're down to, say, the cutoff score for funding is a 95. And we have 10 projects that score 95. How do we decide? And of those 10 projects, the request is 200 million. We only have 10 million. So how do we decide what we're going to fund? So we currently have a section in the guidelines that has project selection between applications with the same score. And that's what we use. But what's been happening is we're still getting to where we still have basically a tie. So And with this is compounded when we have even less funding. So what we're afraid might have happened is, so say the cutoff score is a 95, we have 10 projects that score a 95. We do our first process of choosing between projects with the same score, and that eliminates 5 projects. We still have five more projects that scored a 95 that are still basically tied. So we need more ways to break that tie, basically, and we'll get to that more. And then the other issue that we have is that we think that the MPOs are going to need more flexibility because their funding is going to be very small. Okay, and then we'll go through each one of these through the workshop. Okay. Okay, so remember that we talked about that the ATP funding is always split into the 3 components: statewide, small urban and rural, and MPO. In statute, we always have to do that. Okay, so what does that mean? So we have, like in the earlier slide, we have 167.5 million available for this cycle. So we have to break that down. For the statewide component, we'll have about 84,350,000 to program against statewide component. Small urban and rural will have 16,870,000. Okay, so if you remember back to the summary of what we received this cycle, we received a project that's asking for 60 million in ATP funds. Okay, so and we received a lot of projects that asked for a lot of funds. And we only have, and this is in the statewide, we only have 84 million. Okay, so say that that project that is requesting 60 million scores very high. That means we have 24 million left. So you can see in the statewide, and well, in all of the components actually, we are likely, well, not likely, we will not be able to program very many projects this cycle, at least initially. It may be in the statewide, I mean, this is just guessing. It could be 5 projects, could be 4 projects that, I don't know, maybe if they're smaller, it could be 10 projects, but it's not going to be very many. Same in the small urban and rural. It just depends on how projects score and the size of their request. Because like I was saying, we program to the fund estimate. We can only promise funds that we know we have now. Okay, I know that's confusing, but so I'm going to pause, Rebecca, for any questions, anything that didn't make any sense. There's a lot of brains in this room that can probably help if I am totally confusing. I think everybody's like stunned. No questions.
Oh, well, now we have one. Suzanne Martinez, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, sorry, Suzanne Martinez with Sandag. I like the idea of the adoption of a contingency list of projects. I just have one concern about that. Usually when we submit ATP applications, it's for a certain dollar amount. And depending on how much time goes by until perhaps a project is picked up off the contingency list, that funding amount that was estimated will likely not be sufficient anymore. It's been happening to us just on a year-by-year basis. We're in a position where a lot of our projects, of our bike projects, are now being going into construction, and we're getting really high costs for constructing higher than what we estimated, and so we're running into a situation where we need to come up with our own local funds to be able to cover that. I just wanted to point that out, that a contingency list of projects will likely run into a problem of not having sufficient estimates once they get pulled off the list.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. So let me kind of expand on what Suzanne is saying. So what we are proposing is that we also, along with adopting, which this will happen for statewide, small, urban, and rural, we adopt our program of projects in December. It'll be December of this year. So while we adopt this program of projects that we can fund, we will adopt a contingency list of projects. These are the ones that are there that we'll pull in as we get funding. Okay, so what Suzanne is saying is that say the funding we get awarded, we get appropriated, I don't know, a couple $100 million in a year from now. So we can start pulling in projects off the contingency list, but a year has gone by. And so the next project, they are asking for $10 million, but since a year has gone by, now they need 11 million. The 10 million, they've lost a year in getting their project going, so costs have gone up. So at this point, we are not proposing to provide funding for any. Okay, Teresa's gonna. Yeah. Okay.
This is Teresa, and we have thought about it quite a bit about that because we are delaying the schedule. So a discussion needs to be made as to what happens with those agencies that cannot really afford to put additional funding in the program. And so that is a very, very valid concern and very valid question that we ourselves haven't worked out, because then if a contingency list we prepare equals 400 million, but in reality, if we have delays, we really need 420 million. I think that is an argument for us to make as we are advocating for more funding through our legislation, that, because of your decisions now, this list cannot really happen unless we get additional funding. So at the moment, we do not want to make any commitments. We're just kind of trying to assess how best to proceed. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, so Suzanne, what's happening is because back when we first started working on this, Teresa and I were trying to work through how exactly we would do this, and there's so many unknowns. There's on how much additional funding we could get and when we would get it. It was virtually impossible to figure out an actual true process. So we decided it would be best to keep it high level now. And so then when we do get that funding, then we can kind of decide what we will do then. But we will likely need to do something if we're able to bring into projects off the contingency list. We'll probably ask for an updated schedule and maybe an updated cost estimate. But we don't know for sure. Definitely a schedule though, because a year will have, or if it's a year from now, or whenever it is.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Lori, we have another question from an anonymous attendee. Will you consider partial funding awards to allow more awards?
Partial funding. So the problem with doing partial funding, and I don't know exactly what you mean by partial funding, but we fund fully funded projects. So because we want to make sure that we actually get a project. And the only time that we will program only pre-construction, meaning the environmental and design if it's a large project. So if you're meaning, so if we were to do partial funding, the agencies would have to be able to figure out how to come up with the rest of the funds to fully fund that project. Some agencies can do that and some can't.
Thank you. We have another question from Ben. Can you provide an estimated funding allocation for quick build projects given the reduced funds?
No. So we, in our guidelines that we said that we would fund up to 7 million in quick builds. we're not gonna change that, but I mean, last cycle, we said the same thing and we didn't fund anything. So it's gonna depend how they work out within the, how they score and how it all works out.
Thank you. In that same vein, another question from Alvin Medina. Would you be able to provide again percent allocation for ATP for state, urban, rural, and MPOs? I can say it again if you want me to.
Yes.
Would you be able to provide again the percentage allocation of ATP funding for state, urban, rural, and MPOs?
Okay, so on this, I don't know if I totally understand the question, but if it's how much we have available by component. So this slide is showing in the statewide, we have 84,350,000. Small urban and rural, we have 16,870,000. And then the MPO is like 60 million something, and that's on a 67.48 million, and that's in a future slide when I talk about the MPOs.
But maybe you can tell us because that's the percentage. It's 60.
Oh, the percentage. Okay. Yes. So the funds are split. So no matter what we have in our funding, it's split 3 ways. Statewide, 50% of the funds, small and rural 10%, and metropolitan planning organization, the 10 largest, 40%. That 40% is then broken down between those 10 large MPOs. Is that the question?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we now have a hand raised from Corey Wilkerson.
Okay.
Corey, you are allowed to talk and you can unmute yourself.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
This may be not a something that makes everybody happy, but rather than adopting a contingency list, I recognize the value of having a contingency list, but recognizing that this this cycle seems like it's kind of having to kind of reset for what happened with cycle 6, and maybe that if we, rather than having a contingency list where there's the possibility of having to rescope projects because the available funds is no longer, the project's no longer buildable with the original ask, any additional funds that become available just automatically be programmed to cycle 8, and then we just kind of take cycle 7 for what it is, what we currently have, and move forward with the program rather than having to have all these other contingency things that it just seems overly complicated.
Okay, let me ask you a question, Corey. You started out by saying you could see the reason for doing a contingency list. Why did you say that?
If in case projects fall out, that the projects they can't move forward with the project for whatever reason and they withdraw, then you want to have a list of projects that you can program up to the available funding.
Why else might it be good to have a contingency list?
I mean, the other, it doesn't necessarily have to be a contingency list, but you want to be able to show all of the electeds, like, this is how many projects didn't get funded.
Yep.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be an adopted contingency list. It could just be, this is what we would have funded if we hadn't lost this funding. And I'm worried about getting people's hopes up for the possibility that because their project's on the contingency list, they may get funded. It's hard for local agencies to be able to communicate that to our own local electeds, because they may not understand the nuances behind this program and the complexity behind the program. So we need something that's a little bit more clear.
So I understand what you're saying. We could have a list anyway, because we always have a list, actually. Right. But by adopting a contingency list, it's much more real.
Right, but
tangible.
Well, but it's not, though, because there's no funding behind that list, right? There's no guarantee that anything on the contingency list is going to get funded. So then how
But
does a
we want
local agency communicate how they performed on this cycle? They say, oh, we're on a contingency list. It's like being on the wait list that you never know whether or not you're ever going to be selected.
Corey, this is Teresa, and you are correct. You are
Yeah.
correct. However, we are not guaranteed that we may not get the money. What happens if we do get funding in 6 months from now, after the ATP is adopted, or even a year from then? And I think we wouldn't want to go back and do a programming cycle just to account for those funds. So we internally want to be prepared in case that does occur. And also, there needs to be there's an impact to 400 million. Okay, so there is an impact to 400 million. This is the impact. Now, whether or not the commission should adopt that contingency list, we're going to recommend it. The commission may choose differently, but we think it's important to be prepared in case 6 months, a year, or a year and a half from now, before the next cycle comes along, we get those funds and we are positioned to move projects forward.
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at is, 6 months, a year from now, we're already starting to work on the guidelines for cycle 8. And so if the funds become available, they could easily be programmed and added into the fund estimate for cycle 8, rather than having to go back and go back to the contingency list and have to reevaluate some projects and have the applicants possibly submit different costs that maybe aren't, you know what I mean? Like it just.
No, I get it.
Moves it forward. I don't know. And I'm just trying to kind of play devil's advocate on this, just because it recognizing, at least from my own experience of working at local agencies, that it can be difficult to communicate what exactly it means when you're on the contingency list, because there's so many things that are up in the air and there's so many things that can change. It's hard to, it's almost easier for us to say, yes, we got it. No, we didn't get it. It was too competitive and they reduced the amount of funding that was available.
The reality is going to be that it's going to be a yes or a no. The commission will be programming up to 168 million.
Right.
That's yes. Anything below the line is a no. So
Correct.
I don't think it will be that difficult to communicate, but we are always the optimist. And we're going to say, you know what though? 400 million represents these many projects. We're ready to go as soon as you give us the money. And you know what? At the end, in a year or a year and a half from now, we may come to a point where it is so late in the process that we will then have to consider that option that you just presented, which is rolling it to cycle 8. And that's also a possibility in a year and a half from now.
But the problem is, Corey, if we decide that now, we say that's what we're going to do now.
Yeah.
Do you think we would ever get that 400 million?
I mean, I don't think we're ever going to get the 400 million. I'm just a little bit of a realist on this one. It seems unlikely, and I'd rather have good projects, a better project list in cycle 8 if additional funds become available, like augmentation funds become available in cycle 8. Then to have to go back a year and a half from now, after a lot of work, obviously from legislative support staff and advocacy organizations, everybody that does all that great work that helps to try and bring back some of those funds. It seems cleaner to be able to program the money towards a fresh list, that at least we know at the point when it gets adopted that most of those projects, that the budgets are accurate.
Well, I'm not sure if all of the applicants that already put that work into their projects for this cycle would agree with that necessarily.
I as someone that's submitted sometimes 20 applications on a single cycle, I always look at every application as I can always revise that application and resubmit for a fraction of the amount of work it's never wasted work.
Okay, so that's a good comment, and just so you know,
I know
we talked about, we started out with, I don't know, 7, 8 scenarios.
Yeah.
So it's not like we just went to this meeting we did, so, but,
We-
commission staff feels at this point, our best chance, our best way forward is to develop a contingency list.
Okay.
So we will take your comments into consideration, and like I said, you know, nothing is final until it's adopted by the commission, but, unless we start getting really strong opposition to this, we will do the contingency list.
Okay.
We
Thank you.
received a few more hands. So Yvonne Garcia, please unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, you know, I just want to echo Teresa's comments, and I support the contingency list. You know, it makes it real. It makes it easier for others to advocate for additional funding from the legislature. You know, nobody who really thought we were going to get the $1 billion infusion, right? So maybe we get it as fast as it was taken away. I don't know. But I think it makes it real and something tangible. That's it.
Thank you, Yvonne.
We have another hand raised, Diego Corvera. You may unmute yourself.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, Diego Corvera with the City of Visalia, senior engineer. And yeah, I just want to, contrary to Corey, I do believe the contingency list is important, and I think it'll serve well for local agencies. And his point too, as far as, yeah, the work that goes into these applications and it being a fraction the second time around, as rules change, I'd rather have an application awarded rather than having to redo it. So yeah, just to reinforce, the contingency list is a good idea.
Thank you, Diego.
And then shifting quickly to the Q&A, William Walker is also in support of Corey's original comment of merging 7 and 8 is more equitable. It allows for project sponsors that may not have had resources or technical assistance to attend these meetings to have an opportunity to present projects that meet the core 4, including equity. And then there's one more hand online, Maura. I'm going to allow you to talk and you can unmute yourself when you're ready.
Yes, this is Maura Toomey from the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments. And I don't think there's anybody who's worked in government who's more cynical than I, but I think having a contingency list is really important because we never know what's going to happen in terms of funding. And being able to move projects quickly because you already have an adopted list, if money, whatever amount becomes available, is really critical. And I think, you know, most people who have applied, I know those in my region, don't want to wait for cycle 8 if there's a chance of being funded more quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Maura.
And just to make sure, Corey, your hand is still up. I didn't know if you have anything to add, so I'm unmuting you. Or rather, you'll have to unmute yourself.
No, I don't have anything to add. I'm
Okay,
just.
you can add, lower your hand if you're done. Thank you. And that concludes everything that we have so far, Lori.
Okay, then we will go to the next slide then. Okay, so just so you understand what this would mean in the guidelines, we actually have a section in the guidelines about a contingency list. So we don't have to actually put something in there that says we're going to do a contingency list. We already have the section. It's section 27 of the guidelines. We're just going to change it a bit. So instead of saying the commission may identify, we're going to say the commission will adopt a contingency list of projects to be amended into the program in the event, and we're adding this phrase, additional resources become available, or, and then this is already in there, if a program project has returned award savings or is deleted from the project. And then we're taking out that the contingency list will be in effect only until the adoption of the next programming cycle. We don't want that contingency list. We don't want to put an expiration date on it right now.
question for
Yes.
you, from Alberto again. Would projects in the contingency list in cycle 7 that were not programmed have to resubmit and compete with the application for cycle 8?
That we, so we don't know yet, because that we'll have to find out what happens in cycle 8, and then we will deal with that in cycle 8.
And then from Keith Williams, just a comment that California needs to be ready to fund projects as soon as possible. I fully support a contingency list.
Thank you, Keith. Anything else now? Okay. Okay, so then we can go to the next slide. Okay, so now, this is the other issue that I talked about that I probably didn't explain very well. But this is the project selection between applications with the same score. This is, again, this is already in the guidelines. This is section 20 of the guidelines. So current process. And if we need to, we can pull up our staff recommendations and show you how this ends up happening. Okay, so if 2 or more project applications receive the same score and is at the funding cutoff score, the following criteria will be used to determine which projects will be funded in the following priority order. Okay, so I'm going to use the same example so I don't kind of keep bringing up different things. Okay, so say the cutoff score is a 95 at the statewide. We're programming the statewide 86 million or whatever we had. Okay, so we're going down and we can fund everything down to a 95. I will be honest that I don't even think we will fund down to a 95. It's probably going to be in like a 98, but let's just say 95 to be positive. Okay, so we can fund down to a 95. We have 10 projects that score a 95. And we have $10 million that we have left to program to funds. Those 10 projects that all scored a 95, altogether, it's 200 million. We can only actually program 10 million. So what do? So this is what we do. We take those 10 projects that all scored a 95 and we look at them, and we've done this, I think, since at least the second cycle, maybe the first cycle. So we look first at project readiness, including but not limited to completed environmental documents. So what that means is how close a project is to construction. So to keep it simple, if a project is submitting for construction only, they already have their environmental, they have everything done, they're asking for construction in the first year of the program, that's probably going to end up on the top of the priority order of the 95s. And then we still need to keep going on our tiebreaker base. I don't like calling it that, but that's basically kind of what it is. And then we go to highest score on the highest point value question. So, and that it's different by application. So, so say we have our 10 projects that scored a 95. One of them's a large project, and then another one's plan, I'll say. Okay. The highest point value question on a large application is benefit, correct, Beverly? It is benefit, right? For a large.
Yeah.
The need. So question 2. Okay. On the plan, the highest point value is disadvantaged communities, correct? Okay. So we take those 2 highest point values and we see which one scored higher. So it's not, we can't do it by question because it wouldn't work. This sounds so confusing as I'm trying to think of it. And then if we still have ties, then we go to the highest score and the second highest point value question. Okay, and so far this has worked out where if we take our 1095s, we follow this process, we're able to get it to where we have that $10 million left. We have the 1 or 2 projects or whatever it is that rise to the top of this process that we can recommend for funding. Okay, so, but with very limited funding and with the fact that the cutoff score is going to be very high, maybe like a 98, we're probably going to get a lot that end up scoring at that cutoff. So we are concerned that this process is not going to be enough to get us down. Okay, Beverly's going to help me here. I probably said something wrong. Okay.
So one of the biggest concerns is that the test score is a 98. That score is so high that if we go down to the 2 questions, the need question and the safety question versus that scoring, everyone probably got 100%.
Good point. Good point. So what, if people didn't hear Beverly, what she's saying is that, okay, say the cutoff score is a 98 out of 100. That means the applicant only lost 2 points somewhere. So they likely got full points on every question. So this probably, this may not help us enough to sort through those projects to figure out which programs. So what we are proposing is following this process in priority order. We're going to keep, we have 4, 5, 6 that we're proposing now, which is on the next slide. And we went, oops, where'd my 4, 5, 6 go? It's quite possible. Did I delete a slide? I deleted my slide. Could you?
Can you read it from memory?
Maybe.
Did you use the same one in the track list?
No, because I took what we, there was, so we had some possibilities that we proposed to the technical advisory committee. And they had a couple other ideas, and then we did a poll with our technical advisory committee, and they ranked what they thought were the best continuing tiebreaker criteria. And so I do remember, I remember them. So number 4, we would propose that the number 4 criteria would be if an applicant has submitted to the ATP in 2 cycles or more and has not been funded. So that would be the next, that would be number 4 criteria. Number 5 criteria is if the project was submitted by a tribal applicant. It's number 5. And then number 6 is, I think, the 3rd highest scoring. Is that Emma? I was just going by how the TAC scored them. I think it was the 3rd highest scoring question. Yeah.
Well, they're pulling.
It's,
to repeat them slower.
yeah, I'm, people are gonna need to see it though. Okay. Beverly.
In the meantime, Lori, somebody asked, how does this affect non-infrastructure projects?
Non-infrastructure, it's the same. We would treat all of the different types of projects the same. You know, we did have the non-infrastructure would have a lower priority, but we took that out. So it's the same. What were you saying, Kathy? The first one? Oh, Beverly's doing better, but I will repeat it. It is number 4 criteria would be if an applicant has submitted for the same project in 2 or more ATP cycles and has not been funded, that would be the next top priority. And if you remember, we started tracking that last cycle because it is particularly frustrating for agencies that keep submitting same projects, good projects that's scoring high, and they're missing out barely every cycle. So we wanted to acknowledge that and put that as one of the criteria. And then the next one was tribal governments, because we haven't funded a lot of projects in for tribes in the program. We'd like to fund more. We actually got 5 applications from tribes this cycle, so wanted to make that one of the criteria. Let's see, any questions while Beverly's quickly doing a slide? Okay, thank you, Beverly. Okay, there they are. Suzanne has her hand raised.
Yes, Suzanne, I'm going to allow you to talk and go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to say, I think number 4 is a good idea.
Okay. Thank you, Suzanne. So what Beverly is showing is this is what we would amend into the guidelines. Is that 4, 5, 6 will help us on projects that end up at the same score. Yes.
Candy Vance asked for tiebreaker 5. Could we include applications by tribal governments or co-applicants of tribal governments?
Yeah, we could. I actually was thinking about that. I think we should. Yeah. 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 Thank you, Candy. So sounds like people are generally okay with this. We're not hearing any major opposition. I'll give it another minute here.
Sheila asks, could we move number 4 to be higher on the list?
No. And I'll tell you why, because that 1, 2, 3 that's already in the guidelines. We can't change that. That's in there. We can add to it. I suppose we could change it, but what's that? Yeah, I would agree. I think that's yes, yeah. So it might be a good suggestion for next cycle. We're really, really, really trying to limit our amendments to what absolutely has to be done to deal with the funding reduction.
Another question from Melanie Curry.
Okay.
Will this solve the problem?
I don't know.
I mean, the tiebreaker problem.
Yeah.
Sounds like it would.
What's that?
Sounds like it.
It might or might not. We still might have tiebreaker, and then we'll have to figure out what to do. But yep.
Another question, Q&A, Keith Williams. Oh, I support the additional tiebreaker criteria. Great suggestions. And then Suzanne Martinez, I'm going to allow you to talk whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I guess the last Q&A commenter took my comment. That was my question, is like, what happens if you still have ties after this when we're in the process and we pass number 6 and we still have ties? Are we just gonna
So
or what?
I'll tell you what would happen. This is what I think. We will probably say we end up with 2 projects at the cutoff then, and we only have enough, and we followed this process. They're still neck and neck, still tied. I think our boss is here, so she'll tell me if I'm wrong, that we would probably put that on the programming list with an asterisk, like what we do if we can't totally fund a project at the cutoff, and say that this project, right now, we don't have the funds available, but we will work with the applicant to fully fund the project as funds become available.
I also have something to add. I think it's important to note too that, it's similar to what Lori said, but we also want to create as much flexibility in the process so that, if we need to go beyond the 400 million, we are able to. The bigger concern is going to be for us to stay constrained with a 168 million. So, that's kind of the thought process that, if we have 2-3 projects that are like identical, there is no tiebreaker, we already did everything, then we leave ourselves flexible enough to then put all 3 and maybe go beyond the 400 million.
Yeah, and so and generally what happens is, and this usually happens actually fairly quickly after we adopt a program or project, is that a project falls out, and then we have the savings available to fully fund the project that's at the cutoff line, and if needed, the other project that that was at the cutoff line. So I know that sounds confusing. Programming is sometimes a bit of an art as opposed to just the science. So yeah, so it'll be a programming exercise that we will have to do.
Another question from Patricia Price. Could you change number 6 to go down the point value list until one project remains?
I don't know what that,
I think means like, don't call it a third, you do the third, the fourth, and then keep going.
yeah, I mean, we can add those.
Might be like the safe option too.
It's
So
break
just
the tie.
continue going,
Yeah.
yeah, so we have.
Mhm.
So I high
expected
score
to get
next.
in.
Point.
So, and then we can make it more generic sounding and then say, continue down the,
Yeah,
okay,
have to be careful though, not all applicants have the same number of questions.
right,
So we have to have a
yeah,
proper,
yeah, okay. Yeah, we can do that. Okay. Okay, next slide then. Okay, this is the Metropolitan Planning Organization component. Remember this, that this component gets 40% of the funds. And again, so we would propose to program to the revised fund estimate, which for the MPO component is 67,480,000, and that is divided between the 10 largest MPOs. And it's not divided equally, it's divided on a formula based on population, and I think that's the main. And then, so, and then we would ask the MPOs to adopt a contingency list of projects that could be funded with additional resources. That's section 22 of the guidelines is relating to the MPO component. So the contingency list would be 160 million. That would be, again, divided amongst those 10 largest MPOs. And when we get the revised fund estimate, it'll show what MPO, how much MPO is going to get. We think that the MPOs may need some additional flexibility from what we already have in the guidelines. When we try to figure out all the details of the MPO component in a workshop like this, it's for a lot of stakeholders, it doesn't really matter. So we have a discussion already planned for with the 10 largest MPOs on July 22nd. 2024. So we'll talk through it with them. If you are an agency located within one of those 10 large MPOs and you do want to have some input, I would recommend contacting your MPO. And then they can bring that feedback to the meeting that we're going to have on July 22nd.
Patrick Band asks, can you remind us roughly of the breakdown by MPO for regional fund for past cycles?
We'd have to pull up the fund estimate for the original fund estimate and then guess from there, unless Keith has some kind of magic.
I don't have it readily available. But
Yeah.
ask for it.
Yeah. So, well, we can see what it was for this cycle.
Percentages are, and I can do that, but I'm sure
Yeah, so I did it kind of really rough, and
I was gonna say Carl.
oh, that's right, yeah, Carl did that, yeah, okay. So yeah, we do have that. And the reason that we think that the MPOs may need more additional flexibility is because particularly for the smaller of the large MPOs, their funding programming capacity is going to be very, very small.
That sort of leads into another question we received, which is what does additional flexibility mean?
I don't know. We don't know. So I think the MPOs need to tell us that. And so it could be something like, say their program capacity is so small, they can't program anything. So do we allow them to do that? And then what do we do? Do we hold it for the next cycle? I don't know. I'm not sure what they're going to need and want. So that's why we want to talk with the MPOs. That's the one thing that I had thought about, is that if it's just impossible for them to program anything. So with the MPO component, and this is in statute, that the commission can give flexibility to the MPOs and how they manage their program of projects, but it has to be consistent with the statewide guidelines. So that's the one thing we always have to make sure on. Yes.
We can send the breakdown by MPO. That would be in essence, just won't be able to break down by federal or state funding.
Okay.
You did the entire dollar amount. I'll get that to you.
Okay.
This afternoon.
Okay. Thank you. And Allie, did you have Carl's ref? You know what? Okay. While we're doing that, I keep forgetting this part, but it's important. So one of the things that also that I want to make sure everybody understands is that we're going to have more federal funds and state funds this cycle. So we're going to have to be really careful on state funding only. So most projects, you're going to have to be sure that your project can be federalized. So we can still follow our process of that. If using the federal funding guidelines for the ATP is that if the project has construction of 1 million or more, then the project should expect to be federalized. We could still follow that. We do have a couple of exceptions, kind of where quick builds can be state funded. And then are plans and non-infrastructure state funded? Always? Okay, so plans and standalone non-infrastructure will be state funded because those are usually lower dollar amount projects. Anything, Rebecca? Okay.
This is a bit of a long question. So
okay.
Is it true that due to the clawback of the bumper funding in the last cycle, projects scoring low, like a C- in cycle 6, that were promised funding will now get it, and projects that score much higher, like A in cycle 7, likely will not? And then there's another part.
So I don't know where you're getting C- from, because we didn't even get close to a C- last cycle. Okay. Even with over $1 billion of funding, we only went down to Beverly on the 91,
89.
89,
It's a B
89,
plus.
so a B plus. So no, projects that scored a C minus are not going to get funded over one that score an A plus. And
There's a little bit more to that question. So is there a remedy in the scoring and funding for the future so we get better overall quality projects funded by the state overall? A more even CTC process given fluctuating funding?
is this someone that wants to come off mute, or who is it?
This is anonymous attendee.
So I'm not sure where the belief is that we're not funding good projects, because we're funding excellent projects. I mean, I'm not sure what the concern or question is.
If I understand the questioning correctly, then you'd be saying that because we're backfilling the cycle 6 funds, which are lower scoring, that we're using those funds for the lower scored projects instead of just saying those aren't going to be funded and we'll fund the higher score projects in cycle 7. That's what I thought.
Each cycle is a independent cycle. Okay, we don't go back and look at, well, in cycle 2, this project scored a 98, 91 or somewhere. Each cycle is an independent cycle. Every cycle we've had different funding. The cutoff score has been different every time. That's how we have to manage the program to follow statute, in that we have a new program of projects every 2 years.
And it is important to note that the commitment that is made stays the
Yes.
commitment. That is the reason we just don't go back.
Yes. Yeah, because, I mean, some of those projects in cycle 6, even if they scored a B plus and 89, maybe they've already started their project. Okay. So let's see. So I was talking about federalizing. So it's important that people recognize that projects will need to be federalized for the most part. We may not have as much flexibility in state-only funding projects that we have, because Desiree and Weiser's so they can request state funding only in the application, right? And then you kind of look at it, but we're probably not going to have as much flexibility in doing that this cycle.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. I'm gonna just pause, wait for questions or comments.
We received another one from Amer Attar. Given the scarcity of funds, is it time to discuss amending the guidelines to limit the amount allocated to a single project and the amount any agency can receive? If not for cycle 7, then for the next cycle.
Maybe next cycle, but not this cycle. Because of what I was saying, people, if we can't do that now because people already submitted their projects. They would have possibly made a different choice in what they submit if they would have known we were making that kind of policy decision.
And then just a general comment from Tina Mallow. Thank you so much for all the thought you put into dealing with this funding crisis. It is clear that you are making every effort to be fair, transparent, and mindful of all the work and money spent developing these applications.
Thank you. That was a very nice comment. And I am going to extend that thanks to everybody, because we're all having to work through this. We've never had to talk to Keith so much in our life.
No other questions.
I think Beverly was this the last slide before we get to the? Sure. Yeah. That was the last slide. Well, actually, there was another slide that I accidentally deleted. But I do want to. We still have time, so I just want to pause here and for people to think about what we've talked about. Anything else that comes to mind. I'll remind everyone that these items will be presented at the commission meeting, August 16th and 17th, 15th and 16th. And it's most likely that these ATP items will be on the second day, on the 16th. Not guaranteed, but most likely. So you can always comment at the commission meeting or, however else.
If someone does any written comments.
Yeah, if you send a letter or something, that'll be part of the commission record. It will go in with the commission book.
Just one other general comment from Ameritar. I second the last comment. CTC staff has always been helpful.
Thank you.
William Walker says, I appreciate the contingency tactic. Thank you, staff and stakeholders, for allowing me to attend.
Thank you, William.
Denise Sifford says, on ATP cycle 6, any ideas of when Caltrans expects to have an update on which projects and phases are tied to state versus federal ATP?
There's no update.
Okay, Denise, in case you didn't hear, Desiree says,
Desiree, maybe come over.
Yeah, just to reiterate, there will be no update to the state versus federal funding for cycle 6. It will remain the same.
I want to thank Rebecca too for even the tech on this, because we had to improvise a bit today.
No other questions.
And our contacts, me and Beverly, are on here. But there's always contact Teresa or Desiree or Kathy or Keith, whoever or Allie. If you have any other questions or comments, please contact us. Beverly, you're looking at me like I forgot something. Did I? Okay. Okay.
Kendi Vance, I will unmute you. Or you'll have to unmute yourself, but I allowed you to talk.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Just a quick follow-up on that question for tiebreaker. Lori, I want to make sure we don't use the word tribes. We use the word tribal governments.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're more inclusive. And then this is more of a housekeeping, and I understand it's a new format and stuff, but is there a way where we can still see participants? And is that just a restriction now that we have in this Zoom workplace where we don't get to see who's actually on the call or even get to chat? It's all Q&A. Is that how it's going to be?
So if you mean video, our camera broke in here, so that's why you're not seeing who's in the room. The rest of it, I have no idea.
Gotcha. Okay, no worries. Again, I don't even want to get off track on it. It's just more of a like, man, I really like to know who is actually in here with us. And sometimes it's nice to be able to send that chat real fast to so-and-so or be like, oh, hey, clarify this. And I feel like I'm a little blind here, and I guess I don't like it. So it's just more of a question / comment, but
I don't know if anybody else knows more about Zoom.
It's okay. It's okay. I just
Kendi, I'll make a note of it for any future workshops. This was already set up when I came in here, so I'm sure that there are options I can mess around with for the future.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, there was another hand. I didn't see who it was.
I think William had his hand up.
Oh, okay. William, did you want to put your hand back up? There we go. Okay, you can unmute yourself now.
I was just gonna say what you just said, that's all. You just have to put the settings, so.
Oh, okay.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you.
But thanks for the meeting and, I know that I can't see everyone. I wish I could, but I'm starting to know the voices. It's good to hear y'all.
Thank you, William. Yeah, so all of you probably know Alika, so she's on maternity leave right now. She might even be having a baby right now. We were kind of hoping that she would be on this workshop while she was in labor, but no, she didn't want to share all that with us. So anyway, okay. She is not having her baby right now. So I am hoping for Friday because Friday's my birthday. And so I think July 19th is the best birthday. So I'm hoping for that. But so Alika is not here. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate Rebecca stepping in and helping on this because I really don't know any of this stuff. If it would be up to me, everybody would have to be in this room.
And then I will share these just because they are written in the Q&A. So Jean Lepage, so thanks so much. Appreciate the thoughtful work from CTC staff on this challenging funding cycle. Amer Attar says congratulations to Alika. And Sarkis is sucking up to you, Lori, and saying happy birthday.
Oh, okay, good. And it was Beverly's birthday yesterday. So, yeah. July birthday.
Happy birthday.
Nothing so far. I think that's probably it. They've stopped coming in.
Okay. No, everybody has to stay till noon. Can't go anywhere. Okay. All right. Well, then we can wrap up and please, send us any follow-up questions or call us. And I really appreciate everybody participating today. This was a really, really good workshop, very helpful. And yeah, and these items will be brought to the commission at the August meeting. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being in the room. Bye.